Anyway, I just want to welcome you all to our Development Services Forum. It's a monthly forum. We've been going at this.
Can you use this guy?
Yeah, let me use this. I want to make sure friends at home can hear me. We've had a few technical difficulties this morning, but hopefully this will work. I'll try to project a bit so you can hear me. Does that work in the back? Can you hear me okay? Very good. Want to welcome you again to our monthly Development Services Forum. This morning we're going to be talking about a couple of topics, one related to things you probably all know about or maybe you're responsible for, some development happening here in the city of Walnut Creek. So I'd like to give kind of a development overview and a check both on the residential and commercial side of the ledger in terms of what's going on here in Walnut Creek, things you're aware of or maybe responsible for, or things you're not aware of perhaps. And then from there we're going to go into a discussion, and really kind of the meat of our discussion today is on the development services, or the blueprint for success, which is the city's document, living, breathing document we've been using for the last 18 months to 2 years to chart a course for better delivery of our development services to the development community and to the community in general. So we'll be diving into that. I'd like to start by acknowledging some of those in the room who are visiting us this morning and who have shown up. I'd like to start first with Mayor Cindy Silva and Mayor Pro Tem Luella Haskew. Thank you for being here this morning, early morning. Also, we have a few of the directors in tow. Heather Ballinger is our Public Works Director. And scanning the room, I don't yet see her, but I believe Sandy, I apologize, Dan. This will be my last day at the City of Walnut Creek. It was a pleasure knowing every one of you and working with you. Dan Buckshire, our City Manager, apologies, sir. Thank you. I believe Sandy Meyer, CED Director, will be joining us as well. I see some other faces and names and others who, I appreciate you all being here. And of course, my co-host, Jessica Cole, will be here in a moment to chat with you as well. So I'd like to say thank you, welcome, and I'd like to begin, as I mentioned, with a couple of slides relative to the first part of the presentation on development, what's going on, growth development here in Walnut Creek. Some of it might be redundant for you, but I want to give everyone an overview. And I want to, before I begin, just note, at each table we have a printout of the pipeline list, which is what I'm going to be using as kind of the cited source for these numbers you're about to see and images and things. The pipeline is provided quarterly, updated quarterly, and provided online for users to take a look at what's going on in the city. And again, we don't capture every project. We don't capture minor use permits for fences on this list, but we do capture large developments, commercial, residential, and community facilities. And so if you're interested, we've provided a table copy for each and every one of you to look at, and feel free if you have any questions to fire forth. So here we go with development in Walnut Creek. Predominantly a lot of the development you're seeing and you have been part in has been involved in the core area of downtown. We are not talking about the yellow or beige-ish areas of city. We're looking predominantly at the areas in the downtown core, nestled between the Iron Horse Trail and 680 on the east and west, and from Parkside down to about Kaiser on the south. In terms of residential development, I ran some numbers based on the pipeline list and did some addition, and hopefully my math checks, but we have various stages of projects, right? We've got under construction, we've got those which have been approved and are perhaps waiting financing or something else or permitting to come through. And then, of course, we have those which are under review. And as you can see, there continues to be a predominant portion of that is dedicated to apartment building, followed by condos, and then we also break it down by single-family residential. Under construction currently, there are about a little over 450 units currently being constructed in the city of Walnut Creek across those three categories of housing types. Approved, which includes, and the elephant in the room there is the 596 units of apartments at the BART station. The vast majority, about 60% of which might be getting underway, I believe. I thought someone from Blake Riggs might have been in the room. They're not. Point being is that should be starting, that's phase 2 of the construction. That'll be on the north side of the BART station. The phase 1 side of it was the garage that was just completed and is now functional. Phase 2 will be the north side of the BART station and about 300 units of roughly those 600 that are proposed. So that's why 789 jumps out. And then in terms of under review, and again, this is not indicative of a trend, but you see only 3 units of apartments. I'm sure that number will change, and thanks to all of you, it will change, I'm sure. But at present, and as of the last quarter that we checked it, as of March 31st, that's what was currently under review. But in no way is this indicative of an unhealthy system or the lack of work. Let me tell you, my staff and current planning remains busy, and we appreciate that. we've not plateaued, but we've held steady with our historic trends in terms of applications in, which makes me wonder in terms of in the past we've seen a bustle of activity, and so I'm sure my staff was wondering, where are all of you? Why aren't you coming to visit more often? No, I'm kidding. Point is, we are busy and we appreciate that interest in the community. Of all those units, and there are 1,400 total among single family apartments, condos, 87 units by count, roughly 6% of the total, is made affordable to low, moderate, very low, those levels of income for those households. And I want to be clear that this is a combination of apartments and condos. I didn't break it down, but what it doesn't include is what just opened, and we want to celebrate the fact that 58 affordable units just opened right at the BART station at the Riviera sites, the two Riviera sites, both at the north and south end of Riviera, that RCD, Resources Community Development, came through and built. And so we're happy to celebrate the opening of those 58 units. So if they were included, this number would be higher. They're not. I didn't include them, hence your 6% figure. So with a grain of salt, I think all these percentages can be taken. But I just wanted to highlight the affordable mix in terms of the overall count. Here are some of the pictures. Again, some of you may have designed, built, drawn, built, whatever these images. We have Via right around, a lot of this is around the BART station. As I mentioned, a lot of developments in the core area. Via in the top left, the Riviera apartments I just mentioned have been built and completed. 1910 NOMA was approved, entitled, and is now underway with respect to permitting. And the Walnut Creek Transit Village, again, the south side of the existing garage is where you have the new garage. And to the north side, if you look at that photo, if you can see it from your seats, the right-hand side, the upper right-hand corner of that image is phase 2, a little over 300 units for that project. So that kind of encapsulates the residential development portion of what's going on. Commercial development, we have had activity there. Of course, everyone is familiar with Broadway Plaza and the $250 million, yes, I said billion, $250 million investment that Mace Rich made in our community, and we're thankful for that. The next phase, which is on the vacant site just south of Zara, the Zara building, will be Lifetime Athletic. That is moving through the permitting process, and we're happy to see that moving forward. So there will no longer be that vacant patch of grass or dirt to the south. Soon it'll be a building that looks somewhat like the image shown here. Looking at hotels, Marriott Residence Inn just up the street, again within the core area, BART Station. That project is well underway. They had a slight delay for some materials that were unavailable, and I think being manufactured, and Chip can correct me if I'm wrong, but they have that on order, and it's actually been delivered, and so they're going to return to their construction schedule. I have heard that they have an interim GM, and they're targeting late fall or early fall of this year for ribbon cutting opening of that facility, so we're excited to have that on board. And the Hilton Garden Inn is the project on the Lawrence Way connector to 680, the former courtyard site for the city, the backside of the Stead Motor location. That will be a Hilton Garden Inn, about 125 units in total, and that's moving forward through the permitting process, getting very close to construction time. So that's something exciting to see on the horizon. And then lastly, hyper-local, hyper-focused, hyper-downtown is the Foundry project. That's the 1250 Locust Street project. It's right across from the Century Place Theaters, in between Union Bank and the Koja Kitchen Urban Outfitters building, in between Mount Diablo and Olympic. That is moving forward. I think we're on the verge of accepting the second submittal for permits. We're going through the permitting review for building permits. The developer, BH Development, Brian Hirahara, is leading that charge. And this project is completely entitled. It's ready to move. It's going to happen. We're very excited about that. And so the permitting is going through, and I don't have a timeline on it exactly, but I can tell you that we're actively pursuing, or they're actively pursuing, permitting. So that's a very exciting aspect. Another, that's going to be a food hall for those of you not familiar with the project. It's a 2-level. It's going to have a mezzanine with a first floor. It's going to have a very active back courtyard, which will be privately owned but publicly available. And so the idea was that should be a great public gathering space. And so we're excited about that development. As I mentioned, this is the quarterly updated pipeline list. It's available online at walnutcreek.org. Take a look if you're interested. We update it every 3 months. And with that said, I also want to highlight that we have new development projects highlighted on our city website, and this is in somewhat similar to like a GIS format, but if you click on each button, each number shown in red, It'll bring up a project's description and a couple of photos to the left, perhaps some contacts for a planner if you're interested or need to get in touch, or if any of your constituents, clients, or others have questions. We do provide that information, and this is citywide. This is not just downtown. There are some projects on here outside the core area. So if you're looking for major developments in the city, and an example would be the Rossmore Shopping Center, would be outside the core area, but certainly is on this list. You can find all that information here online at the city's website, and we encourage you to take a look. This is one of our most heavily trafficked pages on our department's page, department web presence. I want to touch on quickly, that was all the current planning, the things that you're aware of perhaps, but maybe some things you were not aware of are the long-range aspects of what the city's working on. April 16th, we're going to be going to City Council for adoption of zoning amendments, the first reading of zoning amendments to implement the West Downtown Specific Plan on the left side of your screen. That's been a multi-year endeavor to provide a vision for development over the next 20 to 30 years, from south of the BART station down to Olympic, and then from 680 over to California Boulevard. Large area, 170 plus acres, a big to-do, but its companion, its cousin, its border to the north is the North Downtown. We don't have a very creative side of naming these, by the way. We just we go with cardinal directions, and that's about as much as you get. We burn up brain power elsewhere. North Downtown Specific Plan is underway, and we have a schedule for potential for adoption looking ahead to later this year, perhaps in the summer into early fall. So we'll keep you posted there in terms of developments. But we've also just recently adopted, thanks to Jessica and her team in economic development, the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was adopted by Council. It's a 5-year plan looking ahead in terms of strategies to employ, to encourage the attraction, retention, and expansion of business in Walnut Creek. We also are currently undertaking the Rethinking Mobility. It's a transportation strategic plan. That's a citywide plan, as is the Economic Development Plan. And so that's an exciting thing. We're engaging the community in a different way, online, electronically, through social media, more so than we have in the past. And you may have seen some of those email blasts, or you may have participated online, and we appreciate that feedback. Lastly, we have the Your Parks, Your Future Plan, which is a look at the infrastructure at 4 unique sites in Walnut Creek and the programming of those sites, including Heather Farm Park, Civic Park, other places in the city. Point being is that this is, again, a future-looking, forward-looking plan, and those are just some things we have going on at the City of Walnut Creek. This is a point at which I turn it over to you to ask if there are any questions or if there are any observations or whatnot. I know we're having, as I mentioned, a few technical difficulties with batteries and cords and other things. We're going to give it a go because we do record these, and we'd like to see if we can capture some of those questions and comments, if any. If you have one, we'll walk the mic to you, and we welcome your observations, if there are any questions. Anyone? All right, we're going to plug our mic in to make sure we can hear you. Okay. That said, I think we can progress, I guess, to the next. Do we want to move on? Or
Recording only this works.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll warm you up. We'll get there. For those of you in the back, we're going to actually transition now slides, so if you want to grab a seat, feel free. We've got some extra ones.
Also like to thank or welcome CED Director Sandy Meyer joined us. Frank Kong, our Chief Building Official, among others, is in the back, so thank you all for being here. And as we transition, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not going to do a song again. Anyway, but thank you again for being here this morning. We appreciate it. We can chat. It's good catching up with some of you earlier.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I think I know pretty much everybody in the room at this point, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessica Cole. I work on innovation and economic development for the city here, and I was fortunate to actually come on board right as the city was diving into its development services blueprint for success. Who here in the room is familiar with the blueprint? Great, okay. Our outreach at work. For those of you who don't know it or need a refresher, this basically was a project that started back in 2016 when we had heard from some community members that they were coming to the counter or doing development in the city, and they felt like it was a process that was maybe a little bit fragmented, where the departments weren't always speaking with each other, or they had moments of feeling like, you know what, I know that individual staff members want me to succeed, but the overall process is making it really hard for me to achieve the ends that I want. And so we actually went out to many of you, and thank you, and we solicited some ideas, and we also went to our staff, we solicited ideas from them. We visited a bunch of other cities all around the Bay Area to look at best practices, and we came up with a blueprint for success, a document that had more than 60 different ideas on ways that we could actually go from good to great in our development services process. Those were across 5 different areas: shared mission, vision, and goals, business process improvements, technology investments, customer service experience, and communications improvements. So we started on that really in earnest right about December of 2016. And we did that for 18 months. It was meant to be a living document where we were going to tackle as many of those as we could. We were going to add new ones as they came up, evolve them, and then even once it ended 18 months later, we are going to continue this work. And we are here today because we are now drafting Blueprint V2. As you can see, our creative naming continues. And so Blueprint V2, we have a couple of specific ideas for audiences and items that we'd like to focus on, but ultimately today marks the kickoff of us reaching out to say, okay, what's your wish list? What can we do over these next 18 months that you'd like to see the teams embark on so that we can continue to make things go from good to great for you all who do work here in the city? So I'll just do a very quick overview of what we did last time, and then the goal is that we start moving around the room and doing some brainstorming. So the overall theme of the blueprint is this, is that on our side, we were recognizing that when we think about the development process, we see a series of individual divisions spread across 2 departments, plus we're not a full service city. So you add on external agencies, and thank you, I know that we have Central Sand in the room, and we have other agencies who come to the forum to help actually make it so that we have better ties together. But we know from what you see, it's the Emerald City. It's, you know, the city made this easy, or the city made this hard. So to the extent that we could, we wanted to act as one team. And we also wanted to build empathy on the other side so that when you came and interacted with us, that we could help you navigate across all of these different divisions. So what are the results? We are still getting better all the time, so we're not here to say that we've hit on everything 100%, but we made some really intense progress. So over 80% of the blueprint items that list ended up actually going live, of the ones that we decided we wanted to move forward with. We have a development services team, which consists of many people in this room, which are the managers of all of those different divisions, and we meet bi-weekly now, so that we can actually share information and talk through projects. We've run more than 180 sessions of commercial express review, which allows individual businesses who are doing fairly simple tenant improvement projects to make an appointment, and then if they come with all their materials, they can leave that day with their building permit approvals. We've updated 4 different ordinances, so we've actually gone and changed the law on a couple of different areas where we wanted to do some cleanup. We've also done some looking at our metrics and picked particular moments in the process that we knew we wanted to improve. We've seen a 10% increase in the initial discretionary applications that are deemed complete. So that's when you submit your discretionary applications, and we have that initial 30-day window to get back to you. What we discovered when we looked at our metrics was that only about 18% of those were being deemed complete in our first round. So our Community and Economic Development Department really worked together as a full team to actually increase that number markedly. We've released a number of online tools. You'll see at your table a little handout about what you can do through Acela, which includes scheduling your inspections online and checking the status of your permits online. We have Open Counter, which is a tool to allow you to check your zoning and do an initial estimate of some of the fees that you might encounter if you're doing different kinds of developments. And we've seen more than 1,200 new users of those tools since launching the blueprint. The Development Services Forum, which happens just about every month to every other month since the start of the blueprint, we have seen more than 50 individual members of the development community attend, many of you here in the room, so thank you. We've also actually recorded a bunch of these, and we've seen more than 500 views of the Development Services Forum on YouTube. also participated in a Facebook Live streaming as a test a couple of months ago. We've seen 100% staff participation across these two departments in some of these SMART goals that we've set for improving things at different sections of the process. And I think that that shows that, again, we're trying to work together and get everybody inside and outside committed and excited about some of this work. The process to draft, you'll remember we did some journey mapping, so we brought really big, long maps of the process and asked you to put stickies all over it. That informed everything from us trying digital plan check, because we heard from some of you that you were spending tens of thousands of dollars on the different applications that you had to submit with plans. We looked at our metrics. So again, this was the chart that led us to looking at that initial discretionary review process. And we went and visited a bunch of different counters all around the region to actually figure out what should we stop, start, and continue based on that. So for those of you who have visited our counter over the last year, you might have seen there's a different way that you can wait, where we'll actually give you cards now based on who you're supposed to see, as opposed to just seating everybody all together. This was a collaborative process. So again, that drafting process was something that we pulled from all of your suggestions. This forum was meant as a way to open up discussion and dialogue and acknowledge that we have so much to learn from each other. So this was one way to make sure that we were having that conversation not just over individual permit applications, but over coffee and donuts. So if you have a suggestion for types of donuts that you'd like to see, now's the moment, is what I'm saying, to get that in. And then we also really tried to open up the dialogue with our outside agency partners. And again, thank you to them for being such willing partners in a lot of this work. And to give you an example, some of that you've seen here, where we've had outside agencies give development services forum topics. Some of that has actually happened behind the scenes. So we had a meeting where we invited a number of outside agencies to say, hey, we are thinking about moving towards digital plan check over time. Here are the tools and processes we're thinking about. Before we make any purchases, before you make any purchases, let's all talk about where we're headed, because ideally for our customers, they would only have 1 or 2 systems that are happening region-wide, as opposed to every single individual agency adopting our own approach to this. The items that we tackled were both low-hanging fruit and high-hanging fruit. So those low-hanging fruit pieces are things we mentioned, like different ways to wait in line at the counter, or new online tools. High-hanging fruit are things like project status meetings. So I know at least a few of you in this room have noticed that when you actually submit a larger project for discretionary review, we now have a project status meeting at the end of your review period when you get your comment letter, where we get representatives from planning, building, engineering, traffic, all in one room together, and we actually have a conversation to talk through the comments as opposed to just delivering it to you in letter form. And if that's something you're interested in and you haven't done it yet, definitely talk to your planner about that option. Finally, we were able to actually really target 3 different types of customers in this work. So one are the people who, for whom going to the development services counter is something that happens once a decade, maybe, and they're doing their individual home renovations, and this is something where they want an understandable process that feels like it is relatively easy to navigate and they can get in and get out. So that was where we cleaned up a lot of our rules and regulations to ensure that they didn't get caught up in some of these higher level review processes, and we improved our counter experience and our checklists. Then we have kind of medium-sized folks who might be doing tenant improvements or doing smaller level developments in the city, and that was looking at those 30-day completeness rates, making some of these online tools available, and also instituting things like commercial express review. And then we have the folks, many of you who are in this room, who are really doing development projects on a regular basis. This is your profession. You're thinking about this all the time. And that was these project status meetings, making our team available for cross-team meetings at stages when we have larger projects on a regular basis, the development services forums, and engaging our commissions, who we've also invited to these forums to ensure that they're accessible and those processes are understandable as well. So that said, what comes next? We're drafting a new blueprint. And we know that we have 3 areas of focus already. So one area of focus that we've heard from you is the design review process. So what are the lines between when something is reviewed at staff level, when it goes to the commission? At what stage would you like to be having those different conversations? What kinds of materials would make that more understandable to you? The second is the permitting process. So what is it about going through permitting that we could make easier or more legible? And then the third piece is the Economic Development Strategic Plan identified business retention as something that really matters to the city. So thinking about how we can continue to be business friendly. So are there things that we can do for businesses or for owners of office space or people who are trying to tenant with some of our local businesses to make their process even more understandable and to also adapt to changing trends, like we're seeing more and more pop-ups, for example. Are there things we can do with our policies to make that a little bit easier as they go through the process? Any questions? Okay, perfect. So now we get to turn the tables. And Ethan's going to play a little Vanna White over here. And our goal is actually for you to have dialogues at your table. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to take 2 minutes and please introduce yourself to everybody else at your table.
And if you're not at a table, please come join us at a table. Sorry, Dan. Quicker the better. I think. Increases the cost of everything that you've got. I'm a subjective review by the department heads for now. Modifying your design. You want to a certain extent, staff has that same ability to design review, but smaller scale, so we tend to cut that out of it a little bit. Exactly. Right. So, and that's a tough one because it's hard for
That mic remains on.
to hear a proposal without it.
As long as that's green, keep that green. Sorry, it's only got a 25-foot tether.
Okay, I know you're probably still doing some introductions and we'll continue, but now it is time to use your brains. You had 30 minutes of coffee. So everybody should be caught up by now. So what we'd like to ask you to do is to brainstorm, and we'll go topic by topic at your table, and then we'll come back and ask you to report out. So the first topic we'd love for you to brainstorm about is the design review process. So when you think about our design review process, what activities or policies or information sharing should we start? What should we stop? And what should we continue? And right now, I will say, we all vow, actually, all staff members in the room, please raise your hand. Okay, so repeat after me. We are open to all ideas. We are in brainstorm mode right now, and we will actually synthesize later. So please, this is meant as an open, welcoming environment for you to feel safe, batting around all ideas, and staff members, please feel free to put your own ideas out on the table. We're in collection mode. So that said, take 4 minutes or so and talk about start, stop, continue ideas around design review.
Look for the green light when you
Design review application has the basics in it, but when it gets to building permits, it's a lot more detailed plans. Right. A lot of times, someone will submit a building permit and be denied because design was struggling. Right. So they've got the detail already there. Now they're
this shoe to drop before they, so it's like in that scenario, the Fed does not do great. Right. But it is kind of at risk because you put your money into detailed plans. So if the design review consequently changes the scope, double the work.
So is there something specific about Broadway Plaza that allows that short-term specific design standards established within?
They've got their own design standards, but the dual review is more of a policy. It's more of a, we'll do this.
Okay, but what I was wondering, was there anything specific about Broadway Plaza that makes it
Because they have their own exterior design standards.
And I would say, as a whole, the building's already there. The massing and all that stuff is already approved. And we're talking about, Bath and Body Works going into it.
right?
Because like Lifetime didn't have that. Lifetime did not have that, yeah. That's a whole building design.
Right. So they had to go through the standard process.
They went through the standard process, but like how was they don't have it. And Michelle already, that went through the initial process.
Yeah, the one that I had about
Great. Yeah, it's 8:35.
how detailed the design basically. So there's a thought is to bring these unshort
Share something smaller.
You're already 90% there.
Conversely, that route is going to allow less of that project. They're subject to the DRC. So trying to find that sweet spot or what types of projects lend themselves to our program.
Just in discussions we have the ones that are
And I know one point they wanted to get it out there.
open to go to DRC for studies. The ones that are really I'm gonna get it 90% there. No, I've done this dance a few times. Yeah, and you're right. I've been secretary to DRC for
All right, we'll bring you back in 1 minute.
Design review is triggered on similar development standards for performance. So an FAR for a given lot is 0.4. If it exceeds 0.22, you're still allowed to do it. Now design review is required because the building mass is so much.
All right. We'll bring it back together. And I would love for a table to volunteer to be the first to report out of any insight that you had. And what I will have you note is we're going to take notes, and we are starting with the design review process. We'll keep moving through, but if you have ideas that occurred to you that were not in that process, we've got a big fat note over there that says other. So we'll take notes on all the rest of it too. So that said, will anyone at any table volunteer to go first just in kind of synthesizing anything that came out of your discussion?
Kurt Bloomstrand with Lennox Homes, and what we have found that we deal in different cities, and so Walnut Creek has been very well organized. So when we come in and we look at a project and we understand what the format is, and so we have found that the city design review has been very, very good, and far as being open to some flexibility to understand sometimes we come up with something that was different, and the city has been very good about listening to us and say that the way we were originally looking doesn't work, and so we come up with something new, and the design review and planning staff has been very open. So that's really key to us, is open-mindedness on what is being presented that is reasonable.
Checks in the mail, appreciate that, thank you for that. That can't be everyone's perspective though, and we welcome start, stop, and continue is the theme here, so I think that's valid. We've recorded hopefully correctly. We appreciate that as a lead off, but are there others with other perspectives? I think we have one here.
No, I don't need the microphone. Okay, yeah, I can speak through it. Dave Boxstead, LCA Architects. One of the things that we kill a lot of trees submitting to you paper. So other cities are doing electronic submittals. But more on the design end of short meetings, we go through a lot of schemes. Sometimes things don't pencil because of the environment outside you. It makes your design standards, but we need to push the envelope, and sort of more shorter meetings prior to PRT, or multiple PRTs, other bites of the apple, to sort of see how a project works economically.
Say stop wasting paper.
I said,
Stop
yeah.
wasting, stop killing trees. Poor Frank Kong, he's gonna he lift weights just moving on paper.
Part of my exercise.
Oh yeah. Oh.
That's a muscle.
Okay, so your idea would be more PRTs, if I'm capturing that correct?
Right.
Also to help staff and you to understand you understand the economics of development for your development, but to help us understand that, and to stop killing trees.
Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts? Thank you for that. Appreciate that. I'm going to try to record.
Yeah, I think I can use that. My voice is low. I want to second that. I think PRT is a fabulous tool for developers to understand what is the best thing or run best thing to do. And so to multiple PRT is very helpful. By the way, for us, we went through, I think, 2 PRT, and then both of them were actually really helpful. In fact, we had some unofficial meetings with the DRC and commissions, and it was very helpful. And I want to send a check in the mail, because I want to encourage, I want to really tell the staff that they did a wonderful job to direct us in the right path as what the commissioners are thinking process might be. But I think one thing that you might want to include, as a previous speaker pointed out, some additional information. Of course, don't kill the trees, but put fees somehow. The economic side of development has to be very, very visible at the PRT level. Okay, so it is very hard to go through all the jurisdictions and find out what the fees and what the economic status might end up being for a project, and make it very visible. If you can, find a way to do that.
Include that as part of the PRT.
And include that as part of PRT.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think the idea about the fees is great, and if there's a way we could really understand the fees earlier, that would be really helpful. I know that Jessica sent something recently that was helpful, but it was not quite there. You're still, I guess it's still in process, so that's cool. I actually disagree with multiple PRTs, and that's kind of what we discussed here. The idea here is to get in front of design review as soon as possible. So I feel like we negotiate, and then you go to the hearing, and they've got different ideas. So let's just cut to the chase and get to the DRC or DRB as quickly as we can. So that's one thing. And then the second thing was, is there a way to eliminate the second DRB? Well, you know, you go to is it DRB or DRC? Okay. It's different in different cities. Okay, so you go to DRC, then you go to Planning Commission, City Council. If necessary, then you go back to DRC. Can you just go to DRC once? Can you eliminate the second one?
On the verge of sounding like a lawyer, it depends. The reason I say that is it depends on the project. For a rezone, by requirement of our law, our ordinances, DRC is supposed to comment and recommend on site planning. PC comments on the land use. Council makes a decision. DRC says, okay, let's finalize the architecture. That's the process side of it. But for other projects, I'm just going to record what you said, which is to, if I can categorize as reduce the number of meetings if possible. Required commission meetings. Is that okay? All right.
And specifically that second round, just to note it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Anyone else from these objectives? Perfect. While we're in the neighborhood.
We didn't discuss this, Jerry Loving, architect. We didn't discuss this at our table, but I think I find that outside agencies, as much as anything, delay the process, and so I can't lay that at the city's feet, other than to understand that the project is baked, so to speak, long before we even file with the city. And so the city needs to understand that to meet fire or utility services requirements, the design is set in many ways. And so there has to be an understanding of that. Finally, something I'm not sure this forum can satisfy, but with all the streamlining of all the savings of time, when you get in the hearing pipeline, sometimes our dear brothers and sisters who serve on those commissions actually get sick. And you're scheduled for a hearing in and around, let's say, the holidays, December, and there's not a forum. And there's not even a meeting. And you're delayed sometimes a couple of months. So all the streamlining, all the savings up in the pipeline before that are lost. I don't know what we do about that, other than just a thought I've had is maybe all the commissioners have to wear a monitoring bracelet so that so we can check their health status. Or seriously, if we scheduled an extra meeting or two, the just in case meetings, because timing, a couple of months lost in a developer schedule is brutal and can really tip the scales of the success of a project. It can, losing a couple of months might actually mean a loss of a year because you miss a particular time schedule. So how to make those hearings more streamlined throughout a year? Like we're coming into the summer, are we going to shut down for the summer? Is there going to be vacations? You get into the holidays, is there going to be holiday breaks, etc.? I think I've made my point. What to do about that? Thank you.
So, yes, exactly. I was just going to say, I know there's more on this topic. What I would ask you to do is if you have other ideas, we have Post-its at the table. So please just feel free to write it with your start, stop, and continue, and we'll make sure that we continue to add to these lists. We want to make sure that we get to permitting, because we know that that is a big topic. If you all, sorry, I'm not following my own advice. If you all would take 5 minutes now to talk with your neighbors about the permitting process and what items we should stop, start, continue on that front, we would love your suggestions.
This is building permits. You've gone through major.
Did you hear anything from your?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any specific
welcome.
Really good. They got a program to train people in. So they like it. It takes a little while to set up. You gotta have the ownership of it. And then there's that transition where you just like the opposite. Still can't do then you had this transition where we accept that, but we don't. And finally you had that cutoff.
McDonald's job, right? Why are they slow right now on the side as part of the, problem with PG&E? I think there's a requirement there they have to comply, right? To get McDonald's side. PG&E? Yeah, I think there was something iron in the river ball. That's in the McDonald's side. They are doing the excavation.
There's a lot of easements.
Right, that's why they have to do it. Got to meet the release, give you power, for the end. It's another, that's not us, it's just focus us right now, media. Who?
All right, we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, so a couple of quick announcements. It is 8:52. That clock is fast. I promise you we will end at 9. We will not take you over. So your fate is in our hands. That said, let's do a round of getting things up on the board. Again, we'll continue to gather after this meeting, but stop, start, continue, permitting side. Who's got something?
Thanks. I'll just speak for the table quickly. So it's along the lines of electronic submittals for sure, because that would help with time frames. So if we were able to start electronic permitting process review, and that would hopefully stop a lengthier process if it's electronic, right? And we would like to continue, but also add to start. So this is going to go in both categories, keeping the outside agencies in the loop. But the request is also even more so if there's a way that we can notify, and this may go to the other, even earlier than the permitting process stage, for outside agencies and what will be required, and if there's a way that we could try and tie, bridge that gap so that there's not such a disconnect between outside agencies and the permitting approval process, because that can cause huge delays in being able to even obtain their permit. When they can't obtain the outside agencies' approvals, our permitting process approval is contingent on outside agencies. So that's a big roadblock.
Thank you. Other?
Thank you, David.
Yeah, the outside agencies are a good scenario for the city economically and everything else, but it would be nice to have more dialogue. They give you 10 pages of plan check comments. It would be great, and we've done this sometimes, and Frank's allowed me to do that. Go meet with them and go through these comments and sort of fast tune some of that. And if you're doing it electronically, then you can get through these comments quicker. But access to the third-party reviewer, have them come. Outside plan checker.
Oh, I thought you meant outside. Thank you. I was going to ask who you were speaking of. So outside plan checkers, TRB, WC,
whoever,
yeah, the consultants.
To be able to do that, so meet with them, building that, and go through these things and quick through some of these things, because it takes back and forth is sometimes too long. Also electronically, when they mark up the drawings electronically, and here's this area that they don't like, if it's just written down there, DSA does that, Department of State Architect. It's easy to make these plan check comments and clarity of thought. We want to all be safe and through that, but to make that work.
Thank you. Anyone from any of these three tables? Yes, perfect. All right, I'm gonna do a floor mic move here. There you go.
Actually the comment about outside agencies is what we spent time talking about, so we really didn't have a chance to talk about this amongst the table. But it actually goes back to the fundamental role of the plan checker. And the city of Walnut Creek has some really smart and qualified individuals. And so what happens is a plan checker that might be a structural engineer has comments, and our structural engineer starts feeling like, that's actually a bad example, starts feeling like, gosh, you know what, they should stamp the plans because the level of their comments. And so my thought was, or maybe one thought would be, is there a way to lighten their load in terms of the extent of their comments if you were to come in with, implement developer has their drawings, your civil set peer reviewed by another civil, and then come in so that you can limit the amount of comments. You know what I mean? It's more of a, basically identifying their role, because I think sometimes they cross the line.
I want to make sure I capture that correctly, Deb, but also make sure I understand it.
Sure.
Your suggestion would be that the developer have your civil engineer's plans peer reviewed by another civil engineer that you've hired, presumably, before you submit to the city, so that you feel it was pretty buttoned up and the city can rest assured that it's both submitted and peer reviewed before it even arrived at our door? Thank you.
I mean, that's just a thought.
Okay.
But the idea is that the plan checkers are really smart and really good at what they do. And what are they actually checking for? Is it the buildability or is it life and safety? The underlying role of the plan checker. And this is a bigger issue, and I don't even know what the solution is, but I'm thinking peer review might help. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if this will stretch too far.
That's okay. So being an outside agency, we agree with Jessica's comment. We really would like to be involved as early as possible in the process. It was brought up, maybe consider having the outside agencies come to your PRT meetings, or at least with those initial comments, so we can wrap them up maybe at the same time if that's possible. But for us, it gets equally frustrating when applicants come to us, and even the smaller projects, at the end, and they're ready for a stamp and they find out they're going to be stuck with us for 2 to 3 weeks. So we would love to talk to people earlier and more often. So.
Anything to this final table in the back? Yeah.
I think we talked a lot about the same stuff. Outside plan checking process. It's good that the developer has that option to choose. We heard that there's maybe a slight cost premium to that. Anything else that kind of we talked about you guys want to add in?
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. I know we had a ton this morning, a ton of content. Here is the promise that we will make to you. We are going to type up these notes and send them to the mailing list of everybody who attended and the development mailing list, and ask if you have anything else to keep adding. We're going to send out a survey, and in return, we would ask for you to do the following. The second Wednesday of every month, so this coming May, that's going to be the 8th, and then June 12th are our next 2 forums. At the June 12th forum is when we'll be bringing back this blueprint discussion, but we hope to continue seeing you at those arenas so that we can continue having this conversation. And the other thing that we will ask of you guys is that you give a warm welcome to Mayor Pro Tem Luella Haskew, who will be closing us out for today.
So I sat there getting happier and happier and happier. I was on the original committee that started to deal with some of the issues that were eating away at our relationship with the outside world and your relationship with the inside world. And while I wanted to congratulate both staff and the participants from the outside world who came in and are seriously trying to help us, is I appreciate that you have trust going both ways. That was a long, hard journey to get there. And it is so exciting to see the positive things that come out of that trust, and I just glow. So thank you very much. And it's 9 o'clock, and we promised you could leave.
Thank you all so much.
Good stuff, Trish.